First Nations teachings and Christian ways. And so they mix the two very easily. For others, they must walk only the traditional path. Well, wherever the Spirit of God is calling them, that's what we have to do. Every person has to follow his or her conscience and the revelation that the Spirit gives them. And so we are together in listening to the Spirit. And this is important for the whole world. There are values that Indigenous people have that the whole world needs to learn if we're going to save the planet whose environment we just disrespect and destroy. First Nations people with the attitude of gratitude and sharing and the respect for family have that to teach the whole world. So maybe the last thing I wanted to talk about is the Jesuits, second last thing, Jesuits have archives. Remember, we've been here for 400 years, and so there is much history and valuable artifacts, etc., that have been collected over these 400 years, and they are kept specially in an archives in Montreal. And First Nations people are invited to go there. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission came and got all kinds of information so that they could write their reports from those archives, and they are available. And so this June, the Jesuits want to take the next step. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission has submitted its report. If you would see the reports, they're on a shelf. They're about as many as this. But now, where do we go? And so this conference is, we call it the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and Hope. And so we have a number of speakers who will come. First of all, Marie Wilson, who is one of the commissioners, here she is here, will speak. And the Honorable Paul Martin, who was had a whole approach to First Nations people when he was in government, will speak. And Noel Starblanket, a very respected knowledge keeper from Regina, will speak. And David Nawagabo, who's a native treaty lawyer from up north, and Charlie Angus, a member of Parliament, and people from a new school that have for young Native children that are just blossoming forth will come. So that's all planned for June the 22nd, and it's our attempt to keep walking with First Nations people and to learn from them, to learn from each other, so that we can build this world that Madeleine said of peace and reconciliation among all peoples. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, panelists, for sharing. I know personally I'm emotionally overwhelmed at this moment for these very honest and raw stories, but stories that we need to hear. At this point, as always, Urban Alliance feels it's important to get the feedback of the community. This is an educational process, so there's lots of people within the audience that will have stuff to offer, but also questions. So at this point, we're going to allow for some Q&A. We'll take 3 questions, and then I'll allow the panelists to ask questions at the same time, answer your questions. Please, because of our time, I'm going to ask if you could, self-monitor. But we'd like to welcome, if there's a couple of empty chairs inside, those of you that might be outside in the hallway, come on in. So questions? Yes.
Okay. I'm a little camera shy, so. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, now we can.
I'm a student. I'm from Ryerson University. I'm familiar with this project that's going on in terms of indigenizing spaces around Toronto. It's called Omega. Maybe someone can help me out. No, I don't remember the name fully, but
A little louder, speak a lot louder.
there's a project that's going on in Toronto that's hoping to indigenize and recover the names of spaces and memories of spaces. And to me personally, being an ally means to think about strategies for decolonization. And one of the things I think about being at Ryerson is that Ryerson is named after someone who was very instrumental in the residential school, like very, very essential part of it. And like, how do we move forward? I was at this series of events called the Social Justice Week at Ryerson, and something that came up there was that there was an Indigenous student who came to Ryerson after learning about who Ryerson was named after, decided to leave Ryerson. I mean, you know, someone would say to him, well, that's not very practical for your life, but it is very practical when you have a whole history of violence and genocide that your family's gone through. So I'm wondering for an institution like Ryerson and other institutions that have so much with their name branding, like they would be very reluctant to change their name, but it represents something so violent in our history. Like how do we carry that forward? I would welcome some thoughts on this from the panel.
Thank you. So much. May.
Okay. Hi. My question, I'm also an ally. I'm not Indigenous. Is the thoughts on the importance of voices, teachers, leadership coming from the Indigenous communities themselves. Differences across Canada can be quite different in terms of regions, and in terms of the first three speakers, just around the importance of speaking sort of both your stories as well as taking that leadership, and that being very important because so much of Canadian history is people, non-Indigenous people, speaking on behalf and making decisions, which is extremely unfair, and of course, as Binish mentioned, a history of violence and colonialism and genocide. So the importance of folks taking that leadership. There are tons of, as both Michael and Kevin have mentioned, leaders, healers, speakers who folks can learn from, both within the Indigenous communities, but also for those of us not in those communities.
Thank you. One more? Please pass it back.
Hello, thank you. I wonder about the continual concerns in the present for these sorts of issues. There's a name I'd like to bring out, which is Jim Treliving. I might be pronouncing his name wrong. He's on Dragon's Den, the TV show, and he owns Boston Pizza. He was in the RCMP in Saskatchewan. There's a lot of very bad stories about him, which I don't so much want to repeat. I think for a public inquiry into murdered and missing or disappeared Indigenous women, something could not be more relevant than a sort of popular hero such as Jim Treliving being able to bypass his earlier actions in the RCMP.
Thank you. So I'm going to turn it back over to the panel and have them respond to any of the questions. Michael, did you want to start us off?
Well, I heard stories about among the current school teachers who are reluctant to be involved in the process of reconciliation, which means they don't want to go there. they're afraid of the truth. So that's what I've been hearing. When I've been to schools and I've been on speaking engagements, I've been hearing a lot about the reluctance of among the current school teachers who are reluctant to be involved in the process of reconciliation.
Okay, voice and leadership by First Nation themselves. Personally, I think all of us, we are First Nation. If we do not feel the pain of each other's, we never change our life, and we, in some part of the history, we might experience the same. We have a very beautiful poem that said by one of Persian poet, and he said, I just want to tell it in Persian and then I will translate it in English. I might not translate it the right way, but I will try myself. So he says, بنی آدم اعضای یکدیگرند، چو در آفرینش ز یک جوهرند، چو عضوی به درد آورد روزگار، دیگر عضو نباشد برقرار، نباشد قرار. Means that all humankind are made of the same mud, the same things, all of us. We have the same blood, we have the same hair, but different colors. Because of that, if one part of the body is in pain, the rest of the body cannot be healed. So we have to remember that by recognizing that First Nation is is a family. If the family do not care about their children, I don't think the neighbor will take care about them, what they are eating, what they are cooking, or how they are cleaning their home. So First Nation should have their voice forever if they want a change for their life.